The room was alive with energy as sunlight streamed through the tall arched windows of the Harvard Lecture Hall. Rows of eager students and scholars filled the space, their notebooks open and pens poised to capture every word from the speaker. At the front of the room, at the center of it all, stood Dr. Evelyn Carter, a woman whose reputation preceded her wherever she went. She was known not only for her brilliance but also for her ability to make even the most complicated topics seem accessible, at least until today. Dr. Carter had spent decades studying advanced mathematics, solving problems that others deemed unsolvable. Her lectures were legendary, drawing crowds from all over the world. This particular talk, however, was special. It wasn't just another routine presentation, it was billed as the unsolvable equation, a challenge she herself had been wrestling with for years. The equation in question was displayed prominently on the massive whiteboard behind her, a jumble of symbols and numbers that looked more like an alien language than something human minds could decipher. As Dr. Carter began speaking, her voice carried authority and confidence. She explained the history of the equation, how it had baffled mathematicians since its inception, and why modern technology still couldn't crack it. "This isn't just difficult," she said, pausing dramatically for effect. "It's impossible." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some nodded in agreement while others exchanged skeptical glances. Everyone knew Dr. Carter didn't make such bold claims lightly. She continued, breaking down the reasons why the problem defied solution. She spoke of limitations in computational power, gaps in theoretical understanding, and the sheer complexity of the variables involved. Each point she made seemed to reinforce her conclusion. No matter how smart or resourceful someone might be, this equation simply couldn't be solved. By the time she finished her explanation, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had started as excitement now felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the weight of impossibility hung over everyone present. But amidst the sea of serious faces, one person wasn't convinced. Sitting near the back of the hall, barely visible among the towering adults around him, was Timmy Dawson. At just 9 years old, Timmy didn't belong in a room full of graduate students and professors. He was there only because his older sister, Emily, had brought him along. Emily was an undergraduate student majoring in biology, and though math wasn't exactly her thing, she thought it would be fun to expose her little brother to something new. Little did she know, Timmy already had a knack for numbers. From the moment Dr. Carter started writing on the board, Timmy's attention was glued to the screen. His wide eyes followed each stroke of the marker, absorbing every symbol and number, as if they were pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. Unlike many of the people around him, Timmy didn't feel intimidated by the equation. To him, it wasn't some insurmountable wall of impossibility. It was a challenge, and challenges were meant to be tackled. As Dr. Carter delivered her verdict, "This is impossible," Timmy tilted his head slightly as if trying to see the problem from a different angle. While others scribbled notes or stared blankly at the board, Timmy leaned forward, his mind racing. He imagined the numbers moving, shifting, rearranging themselves into patterns that made sense to him. It was as if he were playing with building blocks, experimenting with combinations until something clicked. Without realizing it, he was approaching the problem in a way no one else in the room ever would. Emily glanced at her brother out of the corner of her eye and smiled faintly. She was used to Timmy's quirks, the way he could lose himself in thought for hours, the endless questions about how things worked, the surprising insights he sometimes shared during dinner conversations. But even she didn't fully grasp what was happening inside his head right now. All she knew was that he seemed unusually focused, his brow furrowed in concentration as he stared at the board. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter wrapped up her explanation and opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up immediately, but none of them belonged to Timmy. Not yet. Instead, he sat quietly, processing everything he'd heard. The professor answered several queries, her responses calm and measured, reinforcing the idea that the equation was beyond reach. But as the Q&A session wore on, Timmy's hand slowly rose into the air. It hovered there uncertainly, small and pale against the dark wood of the lecture hall seats. At first, no one noticed. The other attendees were too busy debating amongst themselves or waiting for their turn to speak. But then someone pointed him out. Professor Carter?" A voice called from the middle rows. "There's a kid raising his hand back there." Heads turned and suddenly all eyes were on Timmy. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who was this child? Why was he here? And what could he possibly have to say? Dr. Carter spotted the tiny hand waving hesitantly and raised an eyebrow. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to call on him. After all, this was a highly technical discussion, and a 9-year-old probably wouldn't have anything relevant to contribute. Still, curiosity got the better of her. "Yes?" she said, gesturing toward him. "Do you have a question?" Timmy swallowed hard, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. For a brief second, he considered lowering his hand and retreating into silence, but then he remembered something his dad often told him. If you see something no one else does, don't be afraid to share it. Taking a deep breath, Timmy stood up, clutching the edge of his seat for support. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, but his words were clear. "I think there might be another way to look at it," he said softly. The room went silent. Some people chuckled nervously, assuming it was a cute attempt at participation. Others leaned forward, genuinely curious about what he might say next. Even Dr. Carter, who had initially dismissed him as a distraction, found herself intrigued. With a slight nod, she encouraged him to continue. And so, Timmy began explaining his thoughts, piecing together the fragments of logic that had formed in his mind. Though his explanation was simple and lacked the polish of academic terminology, it contained a spark of genius that no one in the room expected, including Timmy himself. Timmy's voice, though soft and tinged with nervousness, carried a clarity that caught everyone off guard. As he began to explain his thoughts, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully as if trying to translate the vivid images in his mind into something others could understand. "I was thinking," he said, his eyes darting between the equation on the board and Dr. Carter, "that maybe we don't need to solve it all at once. Maybe we can break it into smaller parts." At first, some people chuckled under their breath, assuming this was just a child's simplistic take on a problem far beyond his comprehension. But as Timmy continued, the laughter faded. His idea wasn't about simplifying the equation in the traditional sense. It was about reimagining how the pieces fit together. He described seeing patterns where others saw chaos, connections that weren't immediately obvious. To him, the numbers weren't static. They were alive, shifting and interacting like characters in a story. Dr. Carter, who had initially leaned back in her chair with an expression of polite skepticism, suddenly sat up straighter. Her sharp eyes narrowed slightly as she listened, intently. She had heard countless theories over the years, but there was something different about Timmy's approach. It lacked the jargon and formal structure of academic reasoning, yet it was undeniably logical. More importantly, it was fresh, a perspective untainted by years of studying within the confines of established methods. As Timmy spoke, Emily watched her brother with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had always known Timmy was smart. His teachers often remarked on his unusual ability to grasp complex concepts, but this was something else entirely. Here he was, standing in front of some of the brightest minds in the world, holding his own against a Harvard professor. She couldn't help but feel a swell of emotion as she realized how rare and special this moment was. The audience, too, was beginning to shift. What had started as amused curiosity turned into genuine interest. People exchanged glances, whispering to each other as they tried to process what they were hearing. Some scribbled notes furiously, while others simply stared at Timmy, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. Even those who doubted his understanding couldn't deny that his explanation was compelling. Timmy's confidence grew as he spoke, his initial hesitation giving way to enthusiasm. He gestured animatedly, using his hands to illustrate the loops and connections he envisioned. "It's kind of like when you're solving a maze," he explained. "Sometimes, instead of going straight through, you have to go around. You find a different path." His analogy might have seemed childish, but it resonated deeply with the mathematicians in the room. Many of them nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the kernel of truth in his words. Dr. Carter interrupted gently, asking Timmy to clarify certain points. Her tone was warm and encouraging, a stark contrast to the authoritative demeanor she had displayed earlier. "Can you show me what you mean?" she asked, handing him a marker and gesturing toward the board. Timmy hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. The chalky scent of the marker filled the air as he began drawing lines and circles, transforming the intimidating equation into something more approachable. His drawings were far from perfect. His handwriting wobbled, and his diagrams lacked precision, but they conveyed a powerful message. Timmy's interpretation focused not on the individual components of the equation, but on the relationships between them. He showed how certain elements could be grouped together, creating new pathways that simplified the overall structure. It was as if he had peeled back a layer of complexity, revealing a hidden simplicity beneath. As he worked, Dr. Carter moved closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. She asked questions, probing deeper into his logic, and Timmy answered with surprising poise. He didn't shy away from admitting when he wasn't sure about something, but he also stood firm when he believed he was right. This balance of humility and conviction impressed everyone in the room, including Dr. Carter herself. By the time Timmy finished, the atmosphere in the lecture hall had transformed completely. The earlier tension, the sense of impossibility that had hung over the room, had dissipated. In its place was a buzz of excitement, a shared realization that something remarkable had just happened. For the first time in years, the equation on the board no longer felt like an impenetrable fortress. Instead, it looked like a puzzle waiting to be assembled. Dr. Carter took a step back, surveying the board with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. "This is fascinating," she said finally, her voice softer than usual. "I've never seen anyone approach this problem quite like this before." Her words carried weight, and the room erupted into murmurs of agreement. People began clapping, tentatively at first, then more enthusiastically. Timmy blushed, ducking his head as the applause washed over him. Emily, sitting nearby, beamed with pride. She wanted to rush to her brother's side and hug him, but she held back, knowing this was his moment. Instead, she joined in the applause, tears welling up in her eyes. This wasn't just a personal victory for Timmy. It was a reminder to everyone in the room that brilliance could come from unexpected places. The lecture ended shortly afterward, but the conversation didn't stop there. As people filed out of the hall, they gathered in small groups, discussing what they had witnessed. Some praised Timmy's creativity, while others debated the implications of his insights. A few approached him directly, shaking his hand and congratulating him on his courage. Timmy handled it all with quiet grace, thanking them politely but clearly overwhelmed by the attention. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter lingered near the front of the room, deep in thought. She had spent decades immersed in the world of mathematics, yet she had never encountered a perspective quite like Timmy's. It made her reflect on the nature of learning itself, the way experience and expertise could sometimes create blind spots, preventing even the most brilliant minds from seeing alternative solutions. She realized that Timmy's lack of formal training had been an advantage, freeing him from the constraints of conventional thinking. Before leaving the hall, Dr. Carter approached Timmy and his sister. She knelt down slightly to meet Timmy at eye level, her expression warm and sincere. "Thank you for sharing your ideas today," she said. "You've given us all something important to think about." Then after a pause, she added, "Would you like to come to my office tomorrow? I'd love to talk more about your approach and see where it might lead." Timmy blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. Emily nudged him gently, whispering, "Say yes." With a shy smile, Timmy nodded. "Okay," he said softly. Little did he know this invitation would mark the beginning of an incredible journey, a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. As the trio left the lecture hall together, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the campus grounds. Timmy walked beside Dr. Carter, his mind racing with possibilities. He didn't fully understand the significance of what had happened that day, but he felt a spark of excitement deep inside. For the first time, he realized that his unique way of seeing the world wasn't just a quirk, it was a gift. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was a gift that could change the world. The next morning, Timmy woke up with a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in his stomach. He had spent most of the previous night replaying the events of the lecture hall in his mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had he really done something remarkable? Or had everyone just been humoring him because he was a kid? These questions swirled around his thoughts as he got dressed, careful to pick out his favorite shirt, a bright blue one with tiny rockets on it. If he was going to meet Dr. Carter again, he wanted to feel confident. Emily noticed her brother's quiet demeanor during breakfast and gave him an encouraging smile. "You're going to do great today," she said, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Dr. Carter wouldn't have invited you if she didn't think you were special." Her words helped ease some of Timmy's anxiety, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would be different from anything he'd ever experienced before. After all, Harvard professors didn't typically spend their time chatting with 9-year-olds. When they arrived at Dr. Carter's office later that morning, Timmy was struck by how cozy yet professional it felt. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, journals, and awards. A large desk sat in the center of the room, covered in papers and notebooks. But what caught Timmy's attention was the whiteboard tucked into the corner. It was already covered in equations and diagrams, remnants of countless hours spent wrestling with mathematical challenges. Dr. Carter greeted them warmly, offering both Timmy and Emily a seat. She poured them each a glass of water and then turned her full attention to Timmy. "So," she began, leaning forward slightly, "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. I'd love to hear more about how you came up with your idea." Her tone was gentle but curious, inviting Timmy to share without pressure. Timmy hesitated for a moment, unsure where to start. Then, remembering how he'd explained things to her the day before, he decided to focus on the visuals. "Can I use the board?" he asked shyly. Dr. Carter nodded eagerly, stepping aside to give him space. As Timmy picked up a marker, he felt a surge of confidence. Drawing always made him feel more comfortable, and it was easier to show his ideas than to explain them in words. He started by recreating the equation from the lecture, carefully writing each symbol and number. Then, he began breaking it down into smaller sections, circling groups of variables and drawing arrows to connect them. "See, these parts are kind of like friends," he explained, pointing to 2 clusters of symbols. "They work together better when they're close, so maybe we can move them closer." Dr. Carter watched intently, nodding along as Timmy spoke. Occasionally, she asked questions to clarify his reasoning, and Timmy answered patiently, happy to elaborate. He described how he envisioned the equation not as a rigid structure but as a flexible system, one that could be rearranged to reveal hidden patterns. His analogy of the maze returned, and he used it to illustrate how taking a step back could sometimes reveal shortcuts others might miss. As the conversation continued, Dr. Carter grew increasingly impressed. Timmy's insights weren't just creative, they were grounded in logic. While his methods lacked the precision of formal mathematics, they offered a fresh perspective that complemented traditional approaches. She realized that his ability to see connections others overlooked stemmed from his unique way of thinking. Unburdened by years of academic training, Timmy approached problems instinctively, relying on intuition rather than rules. To test his theory further, Dr. Carter suggested running simulations using computer software. She pulled up a program on her laptop and guided Timmy through the process, explaining how they could input his ideas and analyze the results. Though Timmy had never worked with such advanced tools before, he caught on quickly, his natural curiosity driving him to ask questions and experiment with different inputs. Together, they spent hours refining his approach, tweaking variables and observing how the equation responded. At one point, Dr. Carter paused, turning to Timmy with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "what you're doing here is incredibly valuable. Most people get stuck in their ways, relying on the same techniques over and over. But you—" She smiled warmly. "You're looking at this problem from a completely new angle. That's rare, especially in a field like mathematics." Timmy blushed at the compliment, but he also felt a spark of pride. For the first time, he understood that his way of thinking wasn't just different, it was powerful. The realization gave him courage, emboldening him to push even harder. When Dr. Carter proposed testing a particularly bold modification to the equation, Timmy didn't hesitate. "Let's try it," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. The simulation ran smoothly, and the results were astonishing. Not only did Timmy's adjustments simplify the equation significantly, but they also revealed a potential solution path that no one had considered before. Dr. Carter stared at the screen in disbelief, her jaw dropping slightly. This shouldn't be possible," she murmured, half to herself. Then, catching Timmy's wide-eyed gaze, she laughed softly. "But apparently it is." The discovery sent a wave of exhilaration through the room. Emily, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, clapped her hands excitedly. "I knew you could do it," she cheered, pulling Timmy into a tight hug. Even Dr. Carter joined in the celebration, shaking Timmy's hand and congratulating him on his groundbreaking contribution. But beyond the excitement of the moment, there was a deeper significance to what had happened. Timmy's success wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a reminder of the importance of diversity in problem-solving. By embracing perspectives outside the norm, Dr. Carter had uncovered a solution that might otherwise have remained hidden. It was a lesson she vowed to carry forward in her own work, encouraging others to think beyond conventional boundaries. As the afternoon wore on, Dr. Carter took a moment to reflect on the broader implications of Timmy's achievement. She knew that news of this breakthrough would spread quickly, sparking conversations about innovation and creativity in academia. Already, she could imagine the headlines. "A 9-year-old solves the unsolved." But more importantly, she hoped it would inspire people to question their assumptions and embrace unconventional thinking. For Timmy, the experience was transformative. He left Dr. Carter's office that day with a newfound sense of purpose. Though he didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what he had accomplished, he understood one thing clearly: his unique way of seeing the world mattered, and perhaps it could help solve even bigger problems in the future. As they walked back across campus, the sun shining brightly overhead, Timmy couldn't stop smiling. He felt like he was walking on air, buoyed by the knowledge that he had made a difference, even if it was in a small way. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would take him far beyond the confines of a single lecture hall or a single equation. By the time Timmy and Emily stepped out of Dr. Carter's office, word of the boys' remarkable contribution had already begun to spread. The initial whispers among the students and faculty who had attended the lecture quickly turned into a buzz that rippled across campus. By late afternoon, emails were flying between professors, researchers, and even journalists curious about the story of a 9-year-old who had challenged one of Harvard's most respected minds and succeeded. Dr. Carter knew it was only a matter of time before the news went public, but she wasn't concerned about the attention. Instead, she saw it as an opportunity, a chance to highlight the importance of creativity and open-mindedness in problem-solving. She invited Timmy and his family to return the following day for a more formal discussion, this time including a team of mathematicians eager to explore his ideas further. For Timmy, the invitation felt like stepping into another world, a place where his thoughts weren't just acknowledged but celebrated. The next morning, Timmy woke up early, too excited to sleep in. He tugged on his favorite hoodie and bounced down the stairs, peppering Emily with questions about what to expect. "Do you think there will be more people there today?" he asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Emily chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Probably," she said. "But don't worry, you've got this." When they arrived at Harvard, Timmy was greeted by a scene far different from the quiet lecture hall of 2 days ago. A small conference room had been set up, its walls lined with whiteboards covered in equations and notes. Several mathematicians sat around a large table, laptops open and notebooks scattered in front of them. They greeted Timmy warmly, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. It was clear that they were eager to learn more about the child prodigy who had captured everyone's imagination. Dr. Carter introduced Timmy to the group, explaining how his unconventional approach had opened new avenues for solving the equation. "We're here today to build on what Timmy started," she said, her voice steady and encouraging. "Let's see where this takes us." With that, the session began. Timmy took center stage once again, standing beside a whiteboard as he walked, the team through his thought process. This time, however, the stakes felt higher. These weren't just random strangers, they were experts in their field, people whose work shaped the future of mathematics. Yet Timmy didn't let the pressure get to him. Instead, he focused on what he did best, explaining his ideas in simple, relatable terms. He started by revisiting the patterns he had identified, using colored markers to highlight connections between variables. "Think of these numbers like pieces of a puzzle," he explained, pointing to clusters of symbols. "If we rearrange them, we might find a way to make everything fit together better." His analogy drew nods of approval from the mathematicians, who jotted down notes and offered suggestions for refining his method. One of the researchers, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Patel, leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. "What if we apply your idea to other parts of the equation?" he asked. "Could it work there too?" Timmy tilted his head, considering the question. "I think so," he replied. "As long as we keep looking for those hidden links, I bet we can find more shortcuts." Encouraged by Timmix's response, the team dove deeper into the problem, testing variations of his approach and running simulations to verify their findings. Each new discovery brought gasps of excitement and bursts of applause. At one point, when a particularly complex segment of the equation simplified dramatically thanks to Timmy's insight, the entire room erupted in cheers. Even Timmy couldn't contain his grin as he realized the impact of his ideas. Throughout the session, Dr. Carter acted as both guide and mentor, ensuring that Timmy remained at the heart of the discussion. She encouraged him to ask questions and share his thoughts freely, reminding the others to listen carefully to his perspective. Her respect for Timmy's contributions was evident in every interaction, and it inspired the rest of the team to treat him not as a child, but as a valued collaborator. As the hours passed, the energy in the room grew electric. Breakthroughs came fast and furious, each one building on the last. By lunchtime, the group had made significant progress, not just in solving the original equation, but in developing a framework that could potentially be applied to other problems as well. Dr. Carter summarized their achievements during a brief pause, her voice filled with awe. "This is extraordinary," she said. "Timmy, you've given us something truly groundbreaking." For Timmy, the praise was overwhelming but also deeply rewarding. He had always loved puzzles and patterns, but he never imagined his hobby could lead to something so impactful. As the team packed up for the day, several of the mathematicians thanked him personally, shaking his hand and expressing their admiration. One woman even handed him a small book titled The Joy of Numbers, inscribed with a note, "To Timmy, who reminds us all to dream big." That evening, back at home, Timmy reflected on everything that had happened. Emily helped him sort through the notes and diagrams he'd collected, marveling at how much he had accomplished in such a short time. Their parents listened intently, as Timmy recounted the day's events, their faces glowing with pride. "We always knew you were special," his mom said, pulling him into a tight hug. "But this is beyond anything we could have imagined." Meanwhile, online forums and social media platforms buzzed with chatter about Timmy's achievement. Videos of his explanation during the lecture had surfaced, sparking debates about the nature of genius and the value of diverse perspectives in science. Some commenters praised Timmy's creativity, while others argued that his success highlighted flaws in traditional education systems. Regardless of the opinions, one thing was clear: Timmy had ignited a global conversation about the power of thinking differently. The following week, Dr. Carter arranged for Timmy to present his findings at a larger gathering of academics and industry professionals. Though the prospect of speaking to such a big audience made Timmy nervous, he agreed after Emily promised to stand by his side. Together, they prepared for the event, practicing his presentation and rehearsing answers to potential questions. Dr. Carter coached him patiently, emphasizing the importance of staying true to himself. "Just talk like you did with me," she advised. "Be honest, be curious, and trust your instincts." On the day of the presentation, Timmy stood at the podium, his heart pounding as hundreds of eyes focused on him. But as he began to speak, his nerves melted away. He told his story simply and sincerely, explaining how he had approached the problem with curiosity and imagination. When he finished, the crowd erupted into applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Timmy blinked in surprise, overwhelmed by the warmth and support radiating from the room. Afterward, as people lined up to congratulate him, Timmy realized something profound. This wasn't just about math or equations. It was about breaking barriers. His journey had shown that brilliance could come from anyone, regardless of age or background. And perhaps most importantly, it had reminded everyone that the impossible was often just waiting for someone brave enough to try. As he left the auditorium that evening, hand in hand with Emily, Timmy felt a sense of wonder, unlike anything he'd ever known. He didn't fully understand the magnitude of what he had achieved, but he knew one thing for certain. The world was full of possibilities, and he couldn't wait to explore them. The days following Timmy's presentation at the larger academic gathering felt like a whirlwind. What had started as a quiet moment in a lecture hall had snowballed into something far bigger than anyone could have anticipated. News outlets from around the world picked up the story, turning it into headlines that captured imaginations. 9-year-old solves equation Harvard professors called impossible, a child genius rewrites the rules of math, and Timmy Dawson, the boy who proved anything is possible. Journalists clamored for interviews, TV shows extended invitations, and schools across the country began discussing ways to incorporate creative problem-solving into their curriculums. For Timmy, this sudden fame was both thrilling and overwhelming. One morning, he woke up to find his face on the cover of a popular science magazine. Another day, he received a letter from a group of students in California who said they were inspired to tackle tough problems after hearing about him. Despite the attention, Timmy remained grounded, thanks in large part to his family and Dr. Carter, who reminded him to stay humble and focused. "This is amazing," Emily told him one evening as they flipped through a stack of congratulatory letters. "But remember, you're still just Timmy, the same kid who loves puzzles and rockets." Dr. Carter played an instrumental role in helping Timmy navigate this new chapter of his life. She became not only a mentor, but also a protector, shielding him from the pressures of public scrutiny, while encouraging him to embrace opportunities that aligned with his interests. Together, they worked on refining the framework Timmy had developed, collaborating with mathematicians and educators to explore its broader applications. It turned out that Timmy's approach wasn't just useful for solving complex equations. It offered insights into fields like computer programming, cryptography, and even artificial intelligence. One particularly memorable project involved working with a team of engineers to optimize traffic flow patterns in a major city. Using Timmy's method of identifying hidden connections and simplifying systems, the team created a model that reduced congestion by nearly 20%. When Timmy saw the results, his eyes lit up with excitement. "So, my idea helped real people?" he asked Dr. Carter, barely able to contain his joy. She nodded, smiling warmly. "Yes, it did, and it will keep helping more people as we continue to build on it." Despite the accolades and achievements, Timmy never lost sight of why he loved math in the first place. It was fun. For him, numbers weren't cold or intimidating. They were playful, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. This childlike wonder was infectious, inspiring those around him to rediscover their own sense of curiosity. During a panel discussion at a national education conference, Timmy shared his philosophy with an audience of teachers and policymakers. "Math isn't about being perfect," he said earnestly. "It's about trying things and seeing what happens. Sometimes you fail, but that's okay because failing teaches you something too." His words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about how traditional teaching methods often stifled creativity. Many educators admitted they had underestimated the value of fostering unconventional thinking in young learners. Inspired by Timmy's example, several schools launched pilot programs designed to nurture innovative problem-solving skills. Students were encouraged to experiment, make mistakes, and think outside the box, principles Timmy embodied naturally. As the months passed, Timmy's influence extended beyond academia. His story became a symbol of hope for underrepresented groups in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Young girls, children from low-income backgrounds, and students with learning differences saw themselves reflected in Timmy's journey. They realized that intelligence wasn't limited to a specific type of person. It came in all shapes, sizes, and forms. Organizations dedicated to promoting diversity in STEM reached out to Timmy, inviting him to speak at events and workshops aimed at empowering marginalized communities. Through it all, Timmy remained remarkably humble. He didn't see himself as extraordinary. He simply believed he had been given a chance to share his ideas. In interviews, he often credited his success to the people who had supported him along the way: his parents, Emily, Dr. Carter, and countless others who had listened when he spoke. "I'm lucky," he would say with a shrug. "Not everyone gets to do what they love and have people cheer them on." Dr. Carter, meanwhile, underwent her own transformation. Before meeting Timmy, she had prided herself on being a strict adherent to logic and structure. But witnessing his unorthodox yet effective approach challenged her to rethink her assumptions. She began incorporating more creative exercises into her lectures, encouraging students to question established norms and seek alternative solutions. Her classes became known for their dynamic energy, attracting a diverse range of participants eager to learn from her, and indirectly, from Timmy. The bond between Timmy and Dr. Carter deepened over time, evolving into a lifelong friendship. She introduced him to other brilliant minds, opening doors to experiences he never dreamed possible. Together, they attended conferences, visited research labs, and explored cutting-edge technologies. Through these adventures, Timmy gained a deeper appreciation for the vastness of human knowledge and the limitless potential of collaboration. By the time Timmy turned 10, he had become a household name, celebrated not just for his mathematical prowess but for his ability to inspire others. Yet despite his growing reputation, he stayed true to his roots. On weekends, he could still be found building Lego spaceships or sketching designs for imaginary inventions in his notebook. To him, these activities weren't hobbies. They were extensions of the same curiosity that had led him to solve the impossible equation. One afternoon, as Timmy sat in Dr. Carter's office brainstorming ideas for a new project, she paused and looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you know what makes you so special?" she asked. Timmy shook his head. "You don't see boundaries," she continued. "Where others see walls, you see doors. And you're brave enough to open them, even when you don't know what's on the other side." Her words stayed with Timmy long after he left the office that day. They reminded him of something his dad used to say: "If you can dream it, you can do it." For Timmy, dreaming wasn't just about imagining possibilities. It was about believing in them, no matter how unlikely they seemed. And now, thanks to his courage and creativity, countless others were beginning to believe too. As the sun set over Cambridge, casting golden light across the Harvard campus, Timmy walked hand in hand with Emily, chatting animatedly about his latest idea. He didn't know where his journey would take him next, but he didn't need to. All he knew was that the world was full of mysteries waiting to be solved, and he couldn't wait to get started. Years passed, and Timmy Dawson grew into a young man whose name had become synonymous with innovation and possibility. The boy who once stood nervously in a Harvard lecture hall was now a celebrated mathematician, author, and advocate for creative thinking. His journey from solving an impossible equation to inspiring millions around the world became a story told in classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms alike. Yet despite his success, Timmy never forgot the lessons he learned as a child. That curiosity could unlock doors no one else saw, and that every voice, no matter how small or unexpected, deserved to be heard. By his early 20s, Timmy had earned degrees in mathematics and computer science, graduating at the top of his class. But academics were only part of his legacy. What truly set him apart was his ability to bridge gaps between disciplines, combining math with art, technology, and even philosophy to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges. He co-founded an organization called Boundless Minds, dedicated to nurturing creativity in education and empowering underrepresented groups in STEM fields. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and global outreach initiatives, Boundless Minds reached thousands of students, many of whom went on to pursue careers in science and engineering. One of Timmy's proudest achievements came when he collaborated with a team of researchers to develop a revolutionary algorithm based on the principles he had first introduced as a child. This algorithm, known as the Dawson Framework, transformed industries ranging from healthcare to environmental conservation. In hospitals, it optimized treatment plans for patients with complex conditions. In wildlife preservation efforts, it helped predict migration patterns and protect endangered species. The framework's versatility proved that Timmy's approach wasn't just a mathematical breakthrough. It was a mindset, one that encouraged people to see problems not as obstacles, but as opportunities. Despite his accomplishments, Timmy remained deeply connected to those who had supported him along the way. Dr. Evelyn Carter, now retired from teaching, continued to serve as his closest confidant and friend. Together, they wrote a book titled Beyond Imagination: How Curiosity Changes the World. It combined Timmy's personal story with practical advice for fostering creativity, offering readers a roadmap for embracing unconventional thinking. The book became an international bestseller, translated into dozens of languages and read by people from all walks of life. As Timmy traveled the globe giving talks and leading workshops, he often reflected on the ripple effect of that single moment in the Harvard Lecture Hall. Countless individuals had been inspired by his story. Teachers who reimagined their lesson plans, parents who encouraged their children to follow their passions, and students who dared to dream bigger than they ever thought possible. One letter, in particular, stood out to him. It came from a teenage girl named Maya, who wrote to thank Timmy for showing her that being different wasn't something to hide, but something to celebrate. Enclosed with the letter was a photograph of Maya holding a robotics trophy she had won at a national competition. "You made me believe I could change the world," she wrote, "and maybe someday I will." Timmy kept that letter tucked inside his notebook, a reminder of why he did what he did. For him, success wasn't measured by awards or recognition. It was about making a difference, however small. Whether he was mentoring a struggling student, collaborating with experts to solve real-world problems, or simply sharing his love of numbers with anyone willing to listen, Timmy approached every task with the same enthusiasm and humility that had defined him since childhood. His relationship with Emily also remained strong, though their roles had shifted over the years. Once his protective older sister Emily now worked alongside him as the Director of Community Engagement for Boundless Minds. Together, they organized events that brought together scientists, artists, and innovators to tackle challenges through interdisciplinary collaboration. Their partnership was a testament to the power of family and shared purpose, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones you embark on with the people you love most. Dr. Carter, meanwhile, watched Timmy's evolution with pride and wonder. She often joked that meeting him had been the highlight of her career, not because of what he achieved, but because of how he changed her perspective. "Teaching isn't just about imparting knowledge," she would say during interviews. "It's about learning from your students. And let me tell you, I've learned more from Timmy than I ever taught him." Her words resonated with educators everywhere, reminding them of the importance of listening to their students and valuing their unique contributions. As Timmy entered his 30s, he began to focus on passing the torch to the next generation. He established a scholarship fund for young innovators, providing financial support and mentorship to those pursuing careers in STEM. He also launched a podcast called The Curious Mind, where he interviewed pioneers in various fields, exploring how they overcame challenges and embraced creativity in their work. Each episode ended with the same question. What's one thing you'd tell someone who thinks something is impossible? The answers varied, but the underlying message was always the same. Impossibility is often just a matter of perspective. In his later years, Timmy returned to Harvard, not as a wide-eyed 9-year-old, but as a distinguished alumnus invited to deliver the commencement address. Standing on the same stage where his journey had begun decades earlier, he looked out at the sea of graduates and felt a surge of emotion. "When I was your age," he began, his voice steady yet filled with warmth, "I didn't know much about the world, but I knew one thing for sure, that we're all capable of more than we think. We're all born curious, full of questions and ideas that don't fit neatly into boxes. And while the world might try to convince you otherwise, those questions and ideas matter. They're the sparks that light the way forward." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "So my advice to you today is simple. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. Don't be afraid to ask what if. And above all, don't be afraid to fail, because every failure brings you closer to discovery, and every discovery reminds us of what makes us human, the relentless pursuit of understanding." The crowd erupted into applause, rising to their feet as Timmy stepped away from the podium. As he walked off stage, he caught sight of Dr. Carter sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She mouthed 3 words, "You did it." Timmy smiled, nodding slightly. Yes, he had done it, but not alone. Every step of the way, he had been surrounded by people who believed in him, challenged him, and reminded him to keep dreaming. Timmy's legacy endured long after he retired from public life, carried forward by the countless lives he had touched. His story served as a beacon of hope, a reminder that brilliance comes in many forms and that the impossible is often just waiting for the right person to try. And whenever someone faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, they would remember the tale of the boy who raised his hand and found a solution no one else could see.